Alright, so we're going to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban lists today, and just a bunch of thoughts I have on them. Uh, there's not actually like one central thesis to this, so I'm kind of just going to go, and you'll probably hear some things that like are upsetting about ban lists, or that you disagree with, or that like seem contradictory or something like that. But as, how's the phrase go? Do I contradict myself? Very well, I contradict myself. I am large. I have multitudes. Walt Whitman. Okay, so ban lists and Yu-Gi-Oh are a huge thing in this community. I think it's something that almost anybody that you ask in the kind of the core Yu-Gi-Oh TCG community will have an opinion on. Some people think that ban lists are, they're great and they need to happen. Some people hate the ban list. They think that Konami does a terrible job of it. They think they come out too often. They think they don't come out often enough. They think that, they need to be more harsh. They think that they need to be not so harsh. You see ban list predictions, you see ban list reactions, people make O faces and they cross their eyes for YouTube thumbnails. There's all kinds of things. And so, I have found myself, honestly, I've had loads of thoughts on like just Yu-Gi-Oh! Ban lists throughout the years. I've been playing this game for a long time. I really mean it. And, I don't even know where to start. So, I guess I just want to talk about sort of common beliefs or ideas that people have around ban lists and maybe debunk some of them or provide some additional perspective, perhaps. So, first things first, people think that Konami should take player input into account for ban lists because currently, as it stands, that doesn't really seem to be the case. Ban lists just happen. They release, and we are forced to kind of deal with it, and it sometimes seems like the cards that get hit, or the decks that get hit, or the things that come back aren't necessarily aligned with what players generally want. So, what do I think of that? Well, I actually think that the idea that players should give input for ban lists is not an idea I agree with. It really isn't. A younger me might have been like, oh, they should have, some sort of like polls or surveys or whatever about ban lists and like, that way that the community can be involved in like what does or doesn't get hit. Don't think that's true. Here's why. Because if I was to ask you guys right now, what do you think the next ban list should be? Like what should get banned, what should get limited, what should come off the list, whatever. I'd get a gazillion different answers. And down in the comments, you can do it right now. Let me know exactly what you think. Because you'll get a bunch of answers, then a bunch of people will disagree with you, and what it ultimately comes down to is nobody really agrees on what should or shouldn't get hit on the ban list. And I don't really trust the, kind of just... I don't know that the average Yu-Gi-Oh player, that I would trust them to make a good ban list. A lot of people are very impulsive. If they, lose to a deck a lot, they might feel like that deck is unfair and should get hit. A lot of people are also very impatient. They will see a powerful card and, they kind of just want it to get hit quickly. Or a powerful deck needs to get hit like soon. And oftentimes in Yu-Gi-Oh, we find that those things don't always end up that way. Like cards that are strong on release might seem, broken and stuff like that, but then over time, players adapt, players find counterplay. Maybe the card just sort of fades out of vogue and it's just not used anymore and people don't talk about it anymore. There's plenty of examples. I think I've made some of these in past videos, but I think of something like, say, the Trickstar Reincarnation Draw and Lockbird combo. People, hated this combo like just to high heaven and deep hell. People hated facing Trickstars. They hated that you could like lose your hand. And it just seems so unfair and so broken. You hear complaint after complaint after complaint. But you know what? 2 cards never got hit on a ban list? Trickstar Reincarnation, Draw and Lockbird. You could argue maybe at the time that they should have or they shouldn't have, but it seems as though Konami didn't think that was the case. And so, they didn't get hit. Time passed, new decks came out, counterplays happened, people found out that the strategy itself wasn't necessarily that reliable. And here we are. No one talks about them anymore. And there's plenty of other examples I can give. That's just one. But basically, the synopsis of this point here is that I don't think the Yu-Gi-Oh players necessarily know exactly what's best for this game. I'm not saying Konami makes perfect decisions, but I am saying their R&D team has balanced this game for years and years and years. So they do probably have a broader perspective on, what cards are a problem versus what cards or strategies are just a fad and maybe need to be given time to marinate and the players kind of can adapt on their own. It's happened time after time. I mean, they still always manage to hit the truly problematic stuff eventually. Firewall Dragon did get banned. Drew King of All Calamities did get banned. You know, when these cards are problems, that's kind of what happens. So I don't want to say that Konami does a perfect job. I'm just saying that I don't think I would trust any Yu-Gi-Oh player, myself included, to make a proper ban list that's like actually balanced with good intentions. Okay, another thing about ban lists that sort of happens is I think people sort of, I guess, there's this new mentality around ban lists that they are, I think people almost view them as like something that's cyclical and like guaranteed to happen and like needs to happen. So what do I mean by that? Well, basically, when, you know, ban list season hits, that's where you get the YouTubers making the ban list predictions and people are talking and they want a ban list and, you know, like this is what needs to be hit and all that. That's nothing new. But what I mean here is just that, like, I sometimes think players almost expect a ban list just for the sake of a ban list. Like, there have been formats in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where things seem surprisingly balanced and they're rather healthy. There might be a couple of cards that people sort of don't like or whatever, but by and large, you know, people agree that tournament results are varied, lots of different decks can win, but when people look at ban lists, they still sort of expect one to happen just because it can happen. And that's why, at first, I know when Konami said that they changed to the whole new, like, ban list release method, which is that, like, a ban list will happen no sooner than X date. Previously, ban lists always released on like a defined date. Like I remember it was like March 1st and September 1st for a very long time. Then it kind of changed to every 4 months or every 3 months. And most recently it's just, you know, you'll get one no sooner than X date. That doesn't mean that you'll get one on X date. I think right now that's like July 1st, right? It doesn't mean that we'll get a ban list on July 1st. It just means that it won't come any sooner than that. I think that that's actually a pretty good change. In hindsight, at least, it seems like it's a pretty good change because it allows Konami to kind of more dynamically react to formats and problematic cards. People can get a little bit impatient, and I've been on that, you know, side of the fence before. Trust me. I just mean that, like, it seems like there are times when maybe we don't necessarily need a ban list, but people want a ban list because it just sort of pushes the story forward. It pushes things forward. And that's kind of an interesting segue into another thought that I have about ban lists and that comes up a lot from players, and that's that the ban list is strictly motivated by profit. Also been here before. So there have been a lot of instances in the past where Konami will release a ban list that seems to straight up just, you know, cut out all of the old decks at once in order to make room for new archetypes, new themes, new packs, and encourage players to play those. I remember around the time that like windups and injectors and everything had kind of just come out and they hit all the old stuff and didn't hit any of them, even though they seemed to be like really powerful and really broken. So it would appear that Konami in that case was trying to force players to use the new cards. It's happened. A really great example was like kind of that late 2015 ban list that hit Shadal's, Necros, Burning Abyss, and like Cleave, for it's all just like at once. All their cards just got, you know, burnt to the ground, and it was basically in the interests of sort of forcing people to play new things. I see why that seems pretty, you know, extreme, right? Like, wow, you guys are literally, like, these cards aren't even necessarily problems. Maybe people like this format, but you guys are hitting all these cards in these decks just so that we'll play the new stuff. That's so greedy of you. I've been there, like I said. I don't exactly like when it happens, but, you know, truthfully, in hindsight, I think that's more often for the best. And that's because, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players, like, in order for Yu-Gi-Oh! As a game to stay relevant, new packs need to come out. New cards and strategies need to come out and develop. And players need to kind of adapt to those strategies. And then new stuff comes out and it kind of repeats. And it's like just a live stream. That's the live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Sometimes when existing decks are too powerful or too dominant, new stuff simply cannot actually make an impact. A great example I like to bring up is kind of in later 2019 when packs like Rising Rampage and Chaos Impact and other things like that were coming out. None of the archetypes released in them could really make much of a dent. because the Thunder Dragon, Sky Striker, Orcust metagame, and Salamangreats were there too, because that metagame was so, just defined and so far ahead of the competition, new stuff wasn't able to do anything. Marincess, for instance, came out and like they just didn't get played, and there were like other archetypes that just they came out and they just didn't get any play because they weren't good enough to hang with the current set of decks. And in cases like that, I think that a ban list makes a lot of sense because you're trying to move the game forward. Another point about ban lists that I think probably is like my last major one before I maybe go into a bit of small miscellaneous ones, is that the ban list it's certainly a valuable tool for Konami and for players to hit, problematic stuff, but I do think people need to keep in mind that this game will always have a metagame. So even if the current, cream of the crop decks get hit, I've heard like people be like, oh, like they need to hit X thing, like let's say for right now, they need to hit Dragon Link or they need to hit, the Shaddoll Invoke deck because those decks are too strong. Even when those decks get hit, new decks will rise up to take their place. A more harsh way of putting this, perhaps, is that the ban list won't make you a better player. The ban list won't make your favorite, low tier deck suddenly the best thing in the world. If you're losing to, the same sort of set of players, maybe at your locals or at regionals, those players pre and post ban list will still be good Yu-Gi-Oh players. They will still flock towards the next strong deck. And that's fine, that's how competitive metagames go. I think sometimes people maybe put a little bit too much stock in these ban lists and expect that they will hit, the current problem cards and then get surprised when, yeah, maybe that happens, but there will be new cards to take their place. There will be new strong strategies to take their place. It's not to say that the ban list doesn't help somewhat, but, you just can't expect everything to be solved with a ban list. And a bit of an extension of that is a big picture complaint many people have with Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just that it's, the power creep has gone so far, and the decks nowadays, have the 10-minute turns and the long combos and the unbreakable boards, or, it's the overabundance of hand traps or the overabundance of floodgates, or, insert whatever problematic mechanic here. I know like the new one now is kind of the equalizer cards, like the Forbidden Droplets and the Dark Roller No More. Those come up a lot. Or the turn stopper hand traps, like Artifact Lancia, Droll and Lockbird, Dimension Shifter becoming a bit too strong. That's the type of stuff that I don't actually think a ban list is necessarily capable of like changing unless Konami is like really willing to crush, like really buckle down hard on that stuff. Because there's not really a way of like killing off combo decks. Maybe you can hit a couple of the generic extra deck cards. There will be ones that take their place. Maybe you can hit the combos of the most prominent decks like Dragon Link right now, but there will be other combo decks that take their place. So unless you're really willing to hit like dozens and dozens of cards, I don't know that a ban list alone is capable of like returning this game to its former glory that people have of like, duels taking many turns and being more like chess and strategic. I would like that too. That's like my preferred way to play. But I think that power creep has pushed this game so far where we're in a game of, like you go off on turn one, you plus a lot on turn one, you run lots of extenders, that there's just so much to hit that a ban list would be huge. And I don't know. I guess I don't have a lot of faith in that being like a viable solution, or rather seeing the ban list that way. Okay, last couple of miscellaneous points in the ban list. I just want to make sure I kind of get these in here. First of all, I do think it'd be nice if Konami would provide some reasoning, some patch notes, if you will. In a lot of games, when patches come out, people want to, of course, see the patch notes. They want to see what's changed, but also maybe get some insight into where the developer mindset was with these cards. It's crazy that this hasn't been implemented because Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links actually has this. When they release a new ban list, they will give a short blurb on why a certain card was hit the way that it was. This card was hit to discourage this certain strategy or because this particular thing, that sort of thing. It doesn't have to be anything long. I think that they probably don't do it because they know that players would like, pick apart all of their logic and stuff, and then they'd end up in a lot of semantic arguments, or people would claim like, oh, Konami's being hypocritical. They hit this card and they claim they did it for this reason, and then why didn't they hit this? So I know players would that might get to be a bit much and maybe Konami doesn't want to deal with it. But I do think that some small bit of like insight into why a certain card gets hit, especially in the more like controversial ones, like Called by the Grave, for instance, that's like one that that's always been a bit contentious. It would be interesting to see maybe a bit more into Konami's thought process there. And let's see, anything else? I don't know. I think all in all, the ban lists have been surprisingly fine the last few years. We haven't had as many like, huge game overturning ban lists, and maybe that's kind of more of what people are looking for in these lists. But I think that ban lists shouldn't have to happen just because we're a little bored and we want a bunch of cards to come back and everything to just be like completely different. I get it why people think that, because the game can get stale at times, but it's, as you guys know, I like to err on the side of like conservatism with ban lists. I think that, just slashing and burning and killing decks isn't really a good answer. I think that you should take it a little bit more slow. I think you should use this semi-limited list a little bit more. I've made a video on that. I don't know. I guess that's everything about the ban list. Surprisingly, this isn't a ban list predictions video. I unfortunately have not engaged a lot with the competitive metagame as of late, so I don't feel like I have enough exposure and experience with that to make an informed sort of ban list prediction. I hear people complain about Dragon Link and Shaddolls a lot, so maybe those should get hit, but I don't know. Okay, that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think about ban lists. What are maybe your hot takes or controversial opinions about it, or am I just also crazy and wrong and rambling for no good reason? Who knows? All right, anyways, I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.